and we'll let everybody in. I will just do that right now. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our fourth interagency team meeting for the Ballard Interbay Regional Transportation System. We have a handful of folks who are still coming online and some audio that I see connecting. So we are going to give just a second here for everybody to get virtually settled, and then we will launch into our agenda. Just a quick heads up for everybody as you're joining the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be publicly available on the project website. We'll go through our virtual meeting protocols here in just a minute as we get started, but want to make sure everybody is settled first. Okay, it looks like we've got everybody in from the waiting room, which is a great start. It looks like audio is generally connected. So Diane, I'm going to turn it over to you to welcome the group, and then I will walk us through the agenda and take care of all the nuts and bolts boring stuff.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I want to welcome all of our IAT members, my agency colleagues. This is our fourth IAT meeting, and all of you know that in the trajectory of a project like this, you know, at the beginning you're moving along, things are good, you're making products, you're making progress, and then you sort of move into a canter, and then there's a bit of a race. And we are starting to get to race to the finish line period of this project, and all of our consultants, our SDOT staff team, everyone who is participating in this project is really running along with us. I thank everyone for their support, and I welcome the public here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your interest in this project, your continued interest in this project. And our finish line is still a November 1st deadline for this project. So that is what we are moving towards, and it's already the end of August. And we look forward to moving along with you. So thank you so much, and Jennifer, it's yours.
Great, thanks Diane. And again, welcome everybody. My name is Jennifer Wieland. I work for Nelson Nygaard and have the pleasure of supporting Diane and the SDOT team and our interagency team on the BIRT project. I am going to share my screen and get us oriented to our agenda for today. And walk us through what we hope to get out of the meeting, and then we'll handle some introductions and welcome as we get started here. So again, this is our fourth interagency team meeting. Want to really welcome our agency partners. We have a lot, as Diane mentioned, we've been moving really quickly and have a lot of information to cover today. So we are going to jump in pretty quickly to our social and economic impact analysis findings, which is some new content that I know folks have been really excited to see. We'll give a quick update on some of the recent stakeholder engagement, and then move into a discussion about our project list development, what we've been doing in terms of the evaluation and how we've started to refine that project list, both with input from the interagency team and from our recent rounds of public engagement. And then we've got about 20 minutes for public comment. For members of the public, I will give instructions for how to sign up for public comment as we go, and our goal is to wrap up by 1:30 today. So what we hope to get out of this meeting, we do, as Diane and I both mentioned, have a lot of information to share. There's a lot of work that's underway right now. We are specifically looking for input and direction from our interagency team members on the social and economic impact analysis, and also on the progress that we've made in refining our project list and applying the additional evaluation criteria. We will move from here into starting to pull projects into a recommended list. And so that is going to happen over the next few weeks. So as we get started today, let me do a quick run through of our virtual meeting protocols, because this time we are using Zoom. As you all know, we wouldn't want to have an interagency team meeting where we don't try out a different platform just to see what our functionality might be. So for those of you who are members of the interagency team, we would invite you when you're speaking and when you do introductions to use your video if that is possible for you. You can raise your hand if you have a question as we're moving through the presentation. Again, you'll click on the Participants tab to do that, and when the Participants tab opens at the bottom, you will see a little button for Raise Your Hand. If you've got topics for group discussion, comments, or questions as we're moving through the presentation, please also feel free to use the chat window to ask those questions. Or to make comments. Please do know that the chat does become part of the public record, and be sure to pay attention to who you are speaking to. Everyone's got access to the chat, but again, we're going to really prioritize our interagency team members' comments and questions through this and save most of our public discussion for the public comment period. For our members of the public, again, because this is an interagency team meeting, we're very happy to have you here and look forward to your comments as we move a bit later in the meeting. Everyone is muted as we are moving through this early part of the presentation and the interagency team discussion. And we're going to work really hard to make sure that we're ready to start public comment by 1:05 so that we have our full 20 minutes available. Members of the public, you can sign up at the link that I will say and you can see on the screen in just a second. And that is a way to indicate your interest to speak or simply leave a comment. You can also indicate your interest in speaking in the Zoom chat window, and we will log you into our list of commenters. So for those who are on the phone, if you'd like to sign up to talk, we will certainly call on people who have connected by phone. You can also go to www.tinyurl.com/Ballard Interbay to sign up and indicate your interest. So those are our nuts and bolts for the meeting as we get started today. I am now going to just quickly introduce the members of the consultant team by name and firm and ask them to just wave as I run through everybody. And then we'll turn it over to our interagency team members for introductions. So from Nelson Nygaard, we have Tom Brennan, who is our project manager. We have Jerry Stroop, who's our deputy project manager. We have Kendra Braylon from Fair and Peers, one of our technical leads. We have Madalena Kalin and Chris Mefford from Community Attributes. They are leading the social and economic impact analysis. And from Concord Engineering, we have Steve Diebel, and we will soon be joined by Tony Woody as well. So we've got a good group of folks here, lots of content again to cover. And so for our interagency team introductions today, as we get started, I am going to start with Diane and the SDOT team. We'll ask you all to go first. And as you introduce yourselves, I'd like you to tell us one of your favorite places to go in the Pacific Northwest in the summer, and then let us know what you're hoping to get out of today's meeting. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a quick second so we can see our interagency team members as they're introducing themselves. And Diane, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Diane Wider. I'm the project manager for BIRT, and I love Ptolemy Lookout, which is a hike up Mount Rainier.
And Diane, what are you hoping to get out of today?
Boy, I am hoping for all of your contributions, WashDOT and Sound Transit and Metro and the port and just agency collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks. Chisaki, let's go to you next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Chisaki Maraki, and I'm the Deputy Project Manager from the SDOT city side. And my favorite place in the summertime is actually somewhere really nearby. It's the neighborhood like Pea Patch. We have a plot there, and it's like flanked by blackberry bushes. So a lot of people will go there to pick after dinner and on their walks. So it's a lovely place. And what I'd like to get out of today is just to receive feedback from our agency partners.
Thank you. And last on the SDOT side, Andres.
Hi, my name is Andres Arjona, policy and planning intern at the moment. My favorite place in the summer in Seattle is, well, not in Seattle. I like Lake Washington on the Kirkland side because they have nice beaches on that side. And just looking forward to hearing what the IAT team has to say.
Thank you. Okay, great. Let's go to our interagency team members. I will call on you and ask you to come off mute and put on video if you can. Let's start with Jerry Port from the Port of Seattle.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jerry Poor, Port of Seattle Regional Transportation Manager. I hope to get out of this meeting a better understanding of the CAI contribution, the social and economic work, and the congestion management studies. And then also, after last meeting, I was able to review some of the ranking, and that was such high density. I look forward to understanding how we could comment on individual projects in that ranking review in the project list. My favorite summer place is a combination of what we've heard so far, Mount Rainier and Lake Washington.
Great, thank you, Jerry. Let's go to Travis at WashDOT. Hang on just a sec, Travis, there we go.
Presto, okay, cool. Let's see, in terms of things I'm looking to get out of today's meeting, well, actually, I'll start with who I am first. This whole mute thing screwed me up. Travis Phelps, the Washington State Department of Transportation. I work in the agency's Management of Mobility Division. Things that I'm looking for from today's meeting, similar to what Jerry is looking for, a little more hoping to get into a deeper dive in terms of the corridor management approach and some of the ways that we're going to manage mobility through this highly significant regional corridor. And then in terms of, stuff I like to do, places I like to go in the Pacific Northwest, big fan of Lake Whatcom. It's just out of the city. It's someplace different. I've always really liked Bellingham, always wanted to move and live there, but just haven't made that happen. So during the summers when the weather's nice, that's where I go. Back to you.
Great, thanks, Travis. Let's go to Chris Arkels from Metro next.
Hi, I am Chris Arkels. I have camped and backpacked throughout the Northwest for many, many years, so it's hard to pick a favorite place. My favorite place in the city is Kubota Gardens in Rainier Beach. Pretty much go there about 5 or 6 times a year because I love watching the seasons change there. And I recently came back from a week driving up the entire Oregon coast, which is probably my favorite place. And hope to get a better understanding of how all these projects work together and Metro's place in that.
Great, thank you for being here, Chris. We also will be joined in a bit by Brand Costner from King County Metro. So if we see him pop up, we'll welcome Brand then as well. Moving on to Sound Transit. Emily, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Yasakochi. I am with Sound Transit. I am the segment lead for the Interbay Ballard segment of the Ballard Link Extension project. And so let's see, places. I love Anacortes, Washington. Spend most of my summer weekends up there. And it's just great and super chill. And today I am excited to hear more about the social and economic impact analysis and how that was done and the results of that.
Great, thank you, Emily. How about Dan Turner from Sound Transit?
Hey, Jennifer, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting.
No worries.
Yeah, Dan Turner, Sound Transit. I'm the planning lead for West Seattle Ballard Link Extensions project. My favorite place, it's so hard. There's so many great places, but I love Orcas Island all year round, but I love Orcas Island in the summer. Just a wonderful place to be, really special. In terms of what I'd like to get out of this meeting and also probably future meetings, I think given the variety of projects that are being reviewed, the different purposes for each, I I'd like to get a better sense of maybe the vision for the corridor, how these projects work together to achieve a kind of a cohesive vision. And then of course, how does that relate to our project and our goals on the Ballard Link extension and some of our stations in the area?
Thanks, Dan. Chris Rule from Sound Transit.
Hi, Chris Rule. I'm a project manager working on several projects in the West Seattle and Ballard vicinity, and I really also enjoy the San Juan Islands, and I'm also interested in hearing about the socioeconomic methodology.
Okay, great. And I believe that is it for our interagency team members today, unless there's somebody hiding. I believe that's it. Any other interagency team members that I've missed? Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for sharing too what you are interested in learning more about today. We are going to jump into the social and economic impact analysis here pretty quickly. That has definitely been something that I know folks have been interested in learning about and understanding how that's going to unfold. And I think to your questions and comments about how do we start to really weigh in on the different projects that are being considered and think about them as a system in addition to just as individual projects is something that we as a team have started to think about and is definitely going to be a big focus of our next 6 weeks. So we look forward to talking a little bit about that today. Interagency team members, just so you know, we are working to make you all co-hosts of the meeting so that it's a little bit easier for you to mute and unmute yourselves. So hopefully that helps, but we'll try and be on the lookout as we dive into the content. So our last little bit of introduction before we do get into the community attributes work. Diane, you want to give us the quick overview just in case we've all forgotten what the BIRT study is?
Yes. In 2019, the Washington State Legislature mandated that the Seattle Department of Transportation develop a report on how to improve travel for people and goods in Ballard Interbay. And this included, the legislation included that we pull together this interagency team. It says that we will provide recommendations on a timeline for the replacement of the Ballard and Magnolia bridges. And it says that we will be looking at travel for every mode, so freight and cars and buses and people who are walking or biking, and certainly for transit. So that is our mission, and the goal is to be done by November 1st and possibly do a presentation to the state legislature in November. Project elements, so each one of these elements is in the legislation, and you can see what we've been accomplishing since January. So we reviewed 20 existing plans for Ballard, Magnolia, the bridges, and the areas from 2010 to 2020. Our consultants have helped us develop forecasting and assessing multimodal integration for the area. Our community attributes is finishing up our cost benefits analysis for both the Ballard and Magnolia bridges. That is both a social and economic benefits analysis, and you'll be hearing about that momentarily. And then as we move into September, we're going to be working on the bridge replacement timeline and funding strategy, and need to have a draft report by October that we will submit at the end of the month. Thank you. And you can find our completed deliverables online. So the document and plan review, the methods and assumptions memorandum, and the multimodal needs assessment. These are largely technical documents that are very fat and have a lot of pages. And if you love to look at that sort of thing, we welcome you onto the website, and the link for the website is on the bottom of this slide.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, great. So let's get into some of this new content as we start today. So interagency team members, as we move through this, there are a couple of key things we'd like you to keep in mind and sort of frame our conversation at the end. We definitely want to hear what questions you have about the information that we're about to present. And then as we move through this, Madalena and Chris will talk a little bit about the differences we're seeing between the scenarios for the different bridge replacement alternatives. And we want to make sure that those are clear and that you're understanding what's gone into those analyses. So we'll keep those pieces in mind as we go. And Madalena, let me turn it over to you and invite you to get us started here.
Great, thank you, Jennifer, and hello, everyone. I'm Madalena Kalin from Community Attributes, project manager, and led the analysis for the bridge replacement alternatives. Our analysis of social and economic impacts of the two bridges assess the potential benefits and limitations of bridge replacement alternatives. And the analysis is focused on scenario level impacts. We are building on the findings from the first phase of our work, which has been a social and economic baseline analysis. The report will be available soon on the project website as well. In terms of the impacts, I think this slide I'll talk about some of the methods and assumptions. And in terms of the economic and social impacts assessed, we are looking at the full first year of operations of the new bridge alternatives. We are not including impacts during the construction period. Our analysis draws on multiple data and information sources. It includes previous plans and studies. So we've mined all of the existing bridge studies that some of you may be aware of. Traffic analysis conducted by firm peers in Concord Engineering as part of this study, and state and federal data sources. We're also leveraging the US DOT benefit cost analysis guidance for discretionary grant programs. One other thing to note on this is that, as some of you may be aware, with previous projected travel times and traffic volumes, you will probably notice that these differ from the ones used in this study because of several reasons. One being the horizon year. We're looking at 2042 for this study. Different analytical methods. So in terms of the traffic model used and project extent. So origin destinations for corridors that have been analyzed. Moving on to what we've been looking at as part of our impact analysis. So the Magnolia and Ballard Bridge alternatives were assessed against several criteria. Travel time, so how does the alternative impact travel time for commuters, freight, and other users of the bridges. Operating costs, so we looked at vehicle operating costs, if there were any savings from less vehicle miles traveled. Safety, were there any impacts on safety for various modes of transportation? We looked at accessibility, mostly focused on accessibility to affordable housing here, but also like housing, jobs, sorry, and non-work destinations. And then how each bridge alternative impacts market demand for real estate market demand in the impacted areas. And finally, costs. Our analysis did not produce new cost estimates. We've just mined previous studies for the cost estimates that have been produced, and we're showing them as part of this analysis. Just to remind everyone, the two alternatives for each bridge that we were scoped to look at were For Ballard Bridge, what is known as Alternative 1 from the Ballard Bridge planning study, the low-level bridge rehabilitation, which includes the rehabilitation and strengthening of the existing Ballard Bridge structures and creates a shared use path. And Alternative 2, which is the mid-level movable bridge that replaces the existing bridge with a higher profile mid-level movable bridge and has several other components, including a modified single point urban interchange at Emerson and Nickerson. For Magnolia Bridge, the in-kind replacement, which keeps the current alignment of the existing Magnolia Bridge and that's alternative, also known as Alternative 4. It follows a similar alignment and it has a similar functionality as the current bridge. And Alternative 1, which is the Armory Way, that constructs a new bridge over the railroad tracks that connects 15th Avenue West and West Armory Way to Thorndike Avenue West. Jumping into the our draft results from the analysis. So you'll see the criteria that I've mentioned. Looking at travel time, in terms of the Ballard Bridge alternatives, there's minimal impact to travel time as shown through traffic analysis conducted as part of this study. The travel times shown here are average daily, covering all travel purposes, so commuters, freight, and all other purposes, HOV, SOV. The mid-level includes time savings of 0.6 minutes on average per day, while the low-level improves by less than half a minute, so 0.2 minutes. We are taking these, I should mention the corridor that we're looking here for the Ballard Bridge is the origin is like the 15th Avenue Northwest and Northwest Market Street, ending at 15th Avenue West and Gilman Drive West. We are applying these travel time savings to value of travel time as recommended by the US DOT guidance to translate into travel time savings for people who are driving along this route. That is equates to $3.9 million for the mid-level alternative in 2018 dollars and 1.4 for the low level. The other criteria we've looked at is operating costs. So in terms of operating costs, usually these results as they're due to changes in vehicle miles traveled. So if people are driving less, then they spend less on fuel, car maintenance, and for freight, that's quite a big change in terms of operating costs for freight operators. In the case of the Ballard Bridge, there was insufficient evidence to suggest that there is an impact for commuters and freight. The change, we've seen some change in vehicle miles traveled, but our understanding from the model is that these are mostly attributable to model assumptions such as land use changes rather than bridge alternative specific improvements. So the models look at certain developments such as the T91 terminal development, the Armory Way. So in 2042, there's assumptions that change the origins and destinations for employment and residence. So some people may live closer to where they work. In terms of safety, potential savings, both alternatives for Ballard Bridge will implement a shared use path, which has the potential to reduce the risk of collisions that involve pedestrians and cyclists. We're applying US DOT recommended crash modification factors from implementing this type of improvement. So they recommend that in this, for a shared use pass, from extensive research, they've seen a 25% reduction in collisions that involve pedestrians and cyclists. So applying that value to the value of preventing different types of crashes, there's a potential impact here of saving $2.65 million per fatal crash and $62,650 per injury crash prevented. I would also add that the a low-level alternative adds a extra wider sidewalks, so there's potential for increased pedestrian safety there. One thing to note is that the safety analysis focuses on non-motorized improvements. The study does not project future vehicle crashes, so a full quantification of safety benefits was not possible at this time. And finally, for the Ballard Bridge cost, so as I've mentioned, we've not produced new cost estimates. That was outside of our scope. So from the Ballard Bridge planning study, the costs for the mid-level are shown here, $971 million versus $471 for the low level, and include design, construction, and right-of-way costs. I'll turn it over to Chris Mefford for accessibility and market desirability discussion.
Thanks, Madalena. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. Madalena talked through a lot of the technical pieces of understanding the economic impacts associated with improvements to the Ballard Bridge. I will talk through some considerations for accessibility and market desirability. That work is still underway for both parts of the project, or both major bridge improvement areas, I should say, within the overall corridor. And in a minute, I'll kick it back to Madalena to talk more about improvements under consideration for the Magnolia Bridge. Accessibility and market desirability, we're told from the traffic modeling that there's relatively little impact or no impact, as Madalena has spoken to, based on accessibility and travel time. The areas of concern that I've been paying careful attention to, then I think we need to continue to pay careful attention to, is the freight and industrial areas in Ballard at the north end of the bridge, around North Leary Way, down to Shilshole, and it's those surface level access points getting on and off the bridge. As we know, the bridge is a critical freight corridor for distribution throughout Seattle and the region. And so we want to make sure that those businesses are not encumbered by new friction in an area that's already experiencing a lot of growth and non-industrial growth that is a part of a lot of our work together. My work for other projects with the City of Seattle, including the Industrial and Maritime Strategy and its tail end, has given us a current appreciation of the maritime and industrial businesses on the north end of the bridge. And so we want to make sure that we are aware of any friction that may arise out of this work. At this point, we aren't aware of anything specific based on the traffic data that we've been given. We've looked more closely, as I said, at the Northwest Leary Way area between 14th Avenue Northwest and 17th Avenue Northwest. And based on what we know right now, we don't see any changes under consideration that would result in adverse impact to economic operations in that area, which translates directly, of course, into the market desirability. We know how much maritime industrial uses value these locations up and down Salmon Bay and the ship corridor and in and around the Ballard Bridge. Those uses, as is the case with most industrial areas in Seattle, the big challenge is that everybody wants to be in those industrial areas. Agnostic to what happens with the bridges, those non-industrial uses are always sort of looming large about seeing the market opportunity to redevelop any of those properties into non-industrial uses. And we also know how highly valued those industrial zone areas are for maritime and industrial businesses, and how critical it is to preserve that industrial zonings to maintain the viability of those businesses, which in fact are a major anchor point of the regional economy. And if they don't work in this area, then they're apt not to find another home within the region. They're apt more to go to Louisiana, Long Beach, and other parts of the country. So it's critical that we do everything we can to preserve the industrial interests in this area. But at this point, based on what we're hearing and seeing right now, we don't know of anything specific that would challenge the long-term market desirability.
Okay, I'll take over for Magnolia Bridge in terms of travel time. So we've looked at the corridor for Magnolia Bridge has been Thorndike Avenue West and West Gaylor Street to West Gaylor Street flyover and Elliott Avenue West. So the current east-west terminus of the bridge, of the current bridge. In terms of the in-kind replacement, there's no impact. It's pretty much the same as the current bridge. The Armory Way sees 13 minutes on average per day increase in travel time, which translates to a 23.1 million in travel time costs. What I would say is that the AM and the PM. So again, this is average daily. The AM and PM are slightly higher, but that's our value for this. Then operating costs, similar to the Ballard Bridge, there's insufficient evidence to suggest an impact. The change in vehicle miles traveled is again mostly associated with land use changes. The safety, so potential savings, we've looked at non-motorized access, similar to the Ballard Bridge, and there are minimal benefits for non-motorized access due to a low level of historic collisions that involve bicyclists or pedestrians. So we've looked at data for the past 7 years in the study area, and there's been no fatalities involving bicyclists or pedestrians on the Magnolia Bridge or getting on and off the Magnolia Bridge. And then there's also relatively small projected increase in pedestrians and cyclist volumes for this alternative. It's still assumed that people will use alternative routes that they're currently using now. And quickly to touch on costs, the estimated costs in the Magnolia Bridge planning study are shown here, 398 versus 269 million. And turning it back to Chris.
Thank you. Okay, for accessibility and market desirability for the Magnolia Bridge improvements, and again, I will remind you that we have not completed this work, so this is sharing with you some work in progress findings. Things get a little bit more complicated here to understand what we're talking about. Probably the most important thing to understand is that 13 minutes increase is not a number that all users of the current Magnolia Bridge would be expected to experience in terms of a 13% increase. It depends heavily on the specific origins that we're talking about, trying to get down onto 15th Avenue West. Traffic volumes right now, you actually see, when we look at the southern neighborhoods and southern residential areas in Magnolia, we see that there's a major collection route. The map I'm looking at doesn't have the label. It must be Kleiss Place that serves as that collector road that pulls in commuters coming from the central area of Magnolia. And under the Armory Way option, they are not apt to take that same route. And that's some surface route analysis that I think that will inform the conversation about travel time impact, because it depends really at a sort of a micro level of where you're coming from. So I think it's a relatively small number of homes in the southern part of Magnolia that would experience the high end of the commute time impacts that are shown under the Armory Way site. The other complication to market desirability, and keep in mind we're talking about Seattle in 2042, so 22 years away from now is our horizon that we're looking at there. The question is, how does changes in access for that small geographic area that we're talking about, how does that factor into all of the other criteria that home buyers and renters consider when choosing where to live in the region? And how do these transportation improvements come into that overall mix of determining what's the desirability of this neighborhood? And we're going to write up our findings more. I would caveat all this to say that keep in mind that community attributes and myself, I am not a housing appraiser. And so when we get into the specifics from a legal and a real certainty perspective, an appraiser might have something very specific and defensible to say, but from an economic attractiveness and market studies perspective, we want to take into consideration the big mix of all the criteria that people might consider when choosing a home. I believe completely in the long term, there will be a significant backlog of buyers that are willing to maintain housing demand in the Magnolia area on the southern area. So even for those small neighborhoods that are very, very close into the bridge itself, if I'm asked whether or not I think there's sufficient demand to maintain the trajectory of market desirability for this area, I would say absolutely yes. The demand, the other criteria, all the lovely attributes about why people choose to live in Magnolia are alive and well between the views and the neighborhoods and the walkability and the access and the bike routes and everything else that go with that. The sensitivity of those few homes that are on that end of Magnolia that are going to be affected by travel time, I believe is going to be far outweighed by all those other desirable attributes. Sometimes that's a tough thing to say to current home occupants when we're looking at longer term in a planning level study, because those folks that are more immediately disrupted might be more hypersensitive to those marginal impacts as perceived by and as experienced by an infrastructure investment. But the umbrella topic of market desirability isn't always about those current residents. It's about that market and what's the larger market and the willingness to pay. Is it in line with the trajectory of home prices and value in Magnolia? We have no reason to think that the increase in travel times would affect the overall desirability. There are some more academic analytics to talk about how travel times correlates to when isolated, but for the desirability and the impact of the neighborhood, is that broader basket of criteria that I think are important.
Chris and Madalena, thank you. This is Jennifer jumping back in again. You've been doing a tremendous amount of work, and I really appreciate you trying to consolidate what I know has been a lot of analysis into some snapshots that we can start to share today. So let me open it up to our interagency team members. I will keep the screen up just so we can flip back to any of the results that Chris and Madalena just shared with us. But what we'd love to hear from the interagency team is if you have questions about what community attributes has just shared with us, if there's anything that you're seeing in the results that is confusing or doesn't make sense to you, and then if you've got any suggestions or requests as we move into further study and really completing the write-up for all of this. So interagency team members, you're welcome to either raise your hand, or if you want to throw on your video, I may be able to see you that way as well. What questions or comments do we have for Madalena and Chris? Okay, I am not seeing anything. Again, Madalena and Chris, thank you so much. That was a tremendous amount of information. Anything that you want to say about your next steps?
Yeah, we're going to work to finish up our report. I did see one of the questions pop up, which I think is a great question, which was why are we so focused on home values? I think it's a great question, and I think it's actually not. It should not be the focus. It's something we're sensitive to, just because we know of the neighborhood concerns, and when we met at the outset of this work with Representative Tarleton, I know it was on her mind to make sure that that was a topic that was at least broached as a part of this project. So we're trying to tread carefully there to make sure we do right by all those interests, and we don't mean to over-index on that. We just know yeah, of the range of impacts, we see that as something that folks might be looking out for. So we'll be wrapping up our work and going through the Nelson Nygaard team as we do that, and we'll look forward to seeing where that goes. Great.
And Jerry Poor, I'm sorry, I heard you as well.
Thank you. Chris, I know you just wrapped, but I had a question before. I'm really having trouble getting my head around the travel time that Madalena presented. For example, when it says, no, not travel. Could we go back to that?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
The Magnolia Bridge or the Ballard Bridge, which is
this one is great. So the 13 minutes is an extended travel time for each vehicle or for all vehicles, or it's average daily?
No, that's important. That's why I tried to contextualize that there. It is, I think the specifics are a starting point and an end point, and the starting point is at the western terminus of the bridge, roughly, or up a block right at the corner of Thorndike and the Magnolia Boulevard there. And the southern screen line, if you will, is down on 15th Avenue West. It's about at the Armory site. Is that roughly where it is, Madalena? Is that the?
Yeah, it's Elliott Avenue and West Gaylor Street, the flyover.
So it's that one segment there, Jerry, that the 13 minutes represents. And that was exactly what I wanted to shine a light on, because when you look at the distribution of homes as origins for those trips, it's only a subset of that South Magnolia neighborhood that would still have to go through that node at the western terminus of the bridge. So there are many other homes that impact would be lower than that amount, because they don't have to go through that route. They've got a straight shot up to where the Armory Way Bridge would otherwise, or would be planned to connect. So, so how we unpack that, I think, is important.
Okay, so thank you for that explanation. And then it's saying that of all the vehicles that are making that move on an average day, each of them is delayed 13 minutes, or
yes,
all of them are delayed 13 minutes?
It's that average across those. Yeah.
Each of them, yeah.
Okay, it looks like we've got a couple other interagency team member questions. Dan, let's go to you next, and then Chris will come to you.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. This is Dan. On the non-motorized access, and maybe I missed this, but have you addressed travel times for non-motorized users, for people walking, biking, or using other non-motorized modes, and also not the safety from a collision standpoint, but the perceived ease of those, whether it's slope or space or level of comfort or anything like that for people walking or biking?
Yeah, so we haven't looked at travel time impacts for non-motorized. There wasn't enough information available to capture that. And then in terms of ease, yes, we've accounted for that within our assessment. For Magnolia Bridge, for example, that's part of the reason why we're seeing minimal benefits, because there's still going to be a slope there, and people are going to prefer taking Thorndike, which most of the bicyclists right now are, because it connects to the Elliott Avenue Trail. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I think it might be helpful, and maybe it's not part of the study, but helpful to look at travel times and where people more from an origin destination look for non-motorized users.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Dan. And Chris Arkels, do you want to chime in with your question?
Oh, I was just posing the question whether it would present a better picture to divide Magnolia into some geographical segments and show travel time that way, and also match that up with how many people segment to give you a real idea of how many people would experience increased travel times.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. With our report, even though we will not have the precision of the travel times by geographic segment, we will show some geographic segments that we think are more greatly affected and less affected.
And I would add to that we've, as part of the analysis, one of the corridors that we also looked at is West Dravis Street, so how that's impacted in 2042, and there were minimal impacts to that as well. So if like people would prefer to take that instead of the Armory Way Bridge.
Yeah, the one thing we should add too is our focus on these impacts has an equity lens on affordable housing as well. And so we're really trying to pay attention on where are the affordable housing units, the folks that are most price sensitive to anything. And so the location, in addition to the segment of the geographic areas that are more or less affected, understanding the types of homes there and how it fits on with an equity lens to not burden folks that are already challenged economically. That's the primary part of our focus, actually.
Great. All right, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Madalena. Anything else from interagency team members on this portion before we move on? Not seeing anything. Folks, members of the public, I do just want to acknowledge and appreciate the comments and questions that you are sharing in the chat. We will capture those and log them as information to take back to the team, and then certainly we'll hear from some of you as we move into public comment. So apologies that we don't have time to address them all as we go through today. So to keep us moving, we are going to move into what we'll do a very condensed update in terms of some of the stakeholder engagement that's underway. And really what we want to share here that feeds into the project discussion is some of the highlights from the recent public meetings, the online surveys that we've done. And we'll be looking for any quick questions from our interagency team members, but I think we'll wrap most of the discussion into the project list conversation. So Chisaki, let me invite you to jump in here and walk us through this piece.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. So as we've previously shared, we have been doing stakeholder engagement on an ongoing process, but some of the recent ones that we wanted to kind of highlight were, staff have been meeting, or the project team has been meeting with elected officials and community organizations that are listed there, and some more. We have briefed the city advisory boards, including the Seattle Freight Advisory Board and the Seattle Bicycle Advisory Board. We have posted calls for interest via the Puget Sound Shipbuilders Association, and through our contacts, our agency partners, the Port of Seattle, we have reached out to the tenants of some of the port-owned buildings and Fisherman's Terminal. And through those channels and some additional ones, we have put out a BINMIC worker survey, really to try to target workers of color to get their input. And we have held business interviews / meetings online and one in person. And we have been focusing on coordination with the mayor's maritime and industrial study. So that's just kind of some of the highlights. And, that, as I said, is ongoing. And so it's engagement that we've done generally, but then also this next slide is kind of focused on the survey that we had open for about 2.5 weeks in the end of July and mid-August, and we received 500 survey respondents. So thanks to the IAT for forwarding the link along, as well as to those who have joined us from the public who have responded to the survey. About 3/4 were residents. Half of the half were those who identifies as visitors, making personal trips in the area. About 11% were employees, those who work there, and 10% were visitors for work trips, and about 8% of business owners. And as you see from our chart to the right, that kind of captures the different modes that people use in the area out of the respondents. And we feel like it was a pretty decent split of people who drive, walk, take transit, bike, etc. And we do recognize that respondents who were, you know, helping or delivering goods at 2% is pretty low, but we are pretty confident that through our freight stakeholder engagement with SFAB, NSIA, and of course having the port as an agency partner, as well as the expertise of the consultant team, and you know, integrating the freight master plan into our work, that the freight stakeholder needs will be balanced and addressed.
And just one of the things that we should note on this slide, right, is that you can be many of these things. So as folks are looking at this and thinking, wow, their math is so bad, that is not even close to 100%. We gave people the option to tell us they travel in multiple ways, and you know, maybe you live in Magnolia, but you go to Ballard for work. So that's
right.
the reason for that math. Go ahead, Chisaki.
Thank you for that clarification, Jennifer. And then in the next slide, just to give you a high-level summary of what we've heard through that survey, that people were really supportive of projects that focused on ped and bike connections. So, you know, the top two were connections to fill network gaps, as well as connections over physical barriers, connection to the future light rail stations, and you know, really high support for Magnolia and Ballard Bridge replacements, and slightly lower in the numbers of support, but still very important, and is reducing delay for driving and freight, as well as transit priority and speed and reliability improvements. So that's kind of the high level summary of what we heard. Some of the specific projects that we got feedback on through the survey was the in-kind replacement of the Magnolia Bridge. The Magnolia Trail, 15th and Elliott, the PBL from Emerson Street to Broad Street, Ballard Locks connection, the interim Ballard Bridge improvements, and 14th Avenue improvements. And I'm not going to go into detail on those because these are ones that rose to the top that will be addressed later on in this presentation.
Good. Thank you so much, Chisaki. And I think, as Chisaki said earlier, we really do appreciate everybody's help in getting the word out to folks. We were pleased to have 500 survey respondents in what was a pretty consolidated effort to really push the word out, and lots of great comments came in, and we're still continuing to work our way through those. So thank you all for that. The last quick update we'll give you in terms of engagement, and then we'll spin this right into our discussion about the projects, is we do have a new video that is coming soon to the project website. One of the things that we have realized through all of our engagement is that we get a lot of questions about the bridges, and very naturally, right? And so people want to know about their condition. Are they really safe? What do those ratings mean, and how do decisions get made around bridge repair and replacement? And so we did a quick interview with Kit Liu, who is one of SDOT's bridge engineers, to ask some of these questions. So for all of you out there who have burning questions related to the bridges, soon we'll have a fun little video that you can watch and learn a little bit more. So again, interagency team members, if you've got questions or comments about the outreach or what you've heard from folks as well. Maybe drop those in the chat and we'll weave them in as we go. But I do want to move us into the conversation about the projects, because of course this is something that you all said you were particularly interested in. This is really important as we get ready to move into the next phase of the project, of the BIRT project. And so want to make sure that we've got some good time to talk about this. For members of the public, I do just want to flag for you again, if you are interested in commenting during the public comment period, please share that either in the chat or go to www.tinyurl.com/Ballard Interbay to sign up to provide comment. We are tracking everybody's interest there. So our key questions for you interagency team members as we move into this next phase, we are going to ask whether we have incorporated your feedback on the project list appropriately. As Concord introduces, and Tony's going to lead us through this, some of the corridor management strategies, we want to know what questions you have about the benefits we're seeing. And then Tom is going to lead us through a little exercise to ask you all which are the projects that feel most important to your agency as we think about what moves ahead from the higher scoring and better performing projects into our recommendations. So keep those questions in mind as we go. And I'm going to turn it over to Kendra to get us started on the projects discussion.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. So as the IAT members know, we've been working to evaluate potential projects to improve mobility in the BIRT study area. And you've provided us with some great inputs. We wanted to report back on how we've incorporated your feedback over the last month or so. So just as a reminder, we looked at initially over 80 potential project ideas in the study area. These span from sidewalk completions and intersection enhancements to some really large scale projects like new bridges and major freight corridor improvements. And so as we've incorporated both your feedback and the community feedback, we've been continuing to refine our analysis. So we can go to the next slide, Jennifer.
Now I got carried away. There you go.
No, that's okay. And so we submitted our initial work to the IAT members kind of early July, and many of you have been really responsive in providing us feedback. So we wanted to report back today in terms of how we have incorporated your feedback into our analysis. So just, you can see there's a lot of stuff on this slide that's kept us very busy, but some of the key things you've asked us to revisit and look at some existing plans and make sure we've taken them to account. So we've certainly done that. You've asked us to add new projects into our assessment, and so we've done that. You've asked us to update our analysis to make sure we're taking into consideration important things like right-of-way. So we've certainly done that, and we have completed our scoring and incorporated some new metrics like equity, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides. So I wanted to talk about some of these major updates in the next few slides. So Jennifer, if you can continue to advance slides. So equity criteria, something that was evident when we talked to the IAT last time, was that you were really interested in understanding how we were considering equity within the sub area. And I really do want to credit some of our members for providing us with really meaningful feedback. So we have evolved the way that we're thinking about the equity of projects in the study area. We're considering both residents and employees and ADA access as equity criteria. So from a residential standpoint, we're looking at projects that benefit residents that are either in lower income quartiles or not areas of the study area that have higher non-white populations. From an employment standpoint, we're looking at wages, and we're looking at projects that improve access to jobs by our lower wage earners, which we know with a very industrial area, it's important that we're helping those workers get to their jobs safely. And then from an ADA standpoint, looking at projects that really improve kind of how people are able to move accessibly no matter what your age or ability within the study area. And so I see Diana, and I just want to make sure, okay, I didn't know if you had a comment you wanted to add. To go on, we've added some projects at the request of IAT members. Just wanted to highlight some of those. 20th Avenue, kind of coming out of the port area there, looked at bike lanes, freight, dynamic freight signage on 15th Avenue West. A lot of discussion has centered around Dravis. So looking at a Dravis bridge replacement. We've recognized that Dravis is a roadway that everybody desires to be on, but it really doesn't provide the width that we need. So a big improvement within the study area could actually be replacing kind of the bridges along Dravis to better accommodate bikes and peds, but at the same time make sure that we're providing that space that's needed for freight mobility and transit mobility. We've talked a little bit about other ways that we can improve the Dravis corridor, signal optimization, and the potential idea of a roundabout at Dravis and 17th Avenue West. And then last but not least, I wanted to highlight the idea of bus lanes along Leary Way. So that TPMC, I'm a real proponent for defining our acronyms and just maybe not using them in some cases, but that's Transit Plus multimodal corridor program for the city. But really that's thinking about rechannelizing Leary Way, and we're looking at between 15th and Market to provide kind of an exclusive bicycle facility. So we can go to the next slide, Jennifer. So we just wanted to kind of share some of the information that we're seeing coming out of here. You will notice that these are the highest scoring projects. You'll probably note that these aren't the bridges. So we're not talking about on this list the replacement of the Magnolia Bridge, or whether we do that in kind or whether we do that as Armory Way. We're not talking about which Ballard option in this list here. We're talking about other investments in the area. Just all of those bridge replacements, they are all game changers within the study area. They all do a lot of things. They're very consistent with the BIRT project and those mobility objectives that we've had. But as we look to other improvements within the study area that are really synergistic with these to improve mobility within the study area, this is kind of what's rising to the top. That Dravis Bridge replacement idea, the concept of making sure that that facility can better accommodate just the plurality of users that are wanting to use it, that's one of our highest performing projects. Thinking about the Elliott Avenue, 15th Avenue corridor, how can we make that a more accessible corridor by providing better sidewalks, lighting, ADA improvements, essentially making that more of a complete street. Wheeler Street, there's a lot of, just given the topography and also given just 15th Avenue and what a big facility it is, thinking about, are there ways to potentially provide pedestrian bridges? And there's a lot of pedestrian bridge connections that really do demonstrate a lot of benefit. We recognize we're not going to be building pedestrian bridges all over this area. The city can't afford that. But there are probably some opportunities within the study area where one or two of these could make a lot of sense. Other things that are kind of rising to the top, the Dravis 17th Avenue roundabout performs extremely well. Really extending the Elliott Bay Trail to essentially connect between the Smith Cove station along Gaylor to Dravis Street. And then pedestrian improvements, crossing treatments of a lot of the areas within our study area. These are some of the improvements that are performing really well. And the last one I do want to hit on during this is what you can see is project number 7 on this list, 15th Avenue West fat lanes. So that idea, and I think Concord will talk about this a little bit more during their presentation, but thinking about 15th Avenue, we've got bus lanes on there today. Is there an opportunity potentially to allow freight to utilize those lanes as well? Obviously, there would need to be complementary capital treatments to that corridor to make sure that it can accommodate freight and transit well along those lanes. But that's a creative strategy that the city's been really interested in to better accommodate freight at the same time as not greatly widening the amount of right-of-way that's given to streets. So that's all that I have for right now. And I guess I'll pause and pass it back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Kendra. Thanks for running through all of that and for your team's work as well. Interagency team members, let's pause here for a quick second before we go into the corridor management strategies. Any questions about what Kendra has just shared in terms of the ways that your feedback was incorporated or the additional elements of the equity analysis that have been completed?
Looks like I get to start again.
Go right ahead, Jerry.
Thanks. Really appreciate the time that the port had to comment on things and get a thorough understanding after the last meeting. And similarly in this meeting, reviewing the materials, my internal group has some additional questions. So I'd just like to hopefully find a time in the next couple days or in the next week anyway that we could get some additional questions answered, which might relate to additional feedback.
Thank you, Jerry. We are absolutely happy to do that and go through some of the detail with your team. So I'll follow up with you after this meeting and we'll find a time.
Thanks, Kendra.
Jennifer, this is Dan. Just a quick question.
Yeah.
On the Dravis and 17th roundabout, a question and a comment. Just curious what's driving the really high score on that project. And then the comment would be that it's adjacent to one of our station alternatives in Interbay, one of the Interbay stations. And so just to keep in mind is if that advances the design of that and how it might relate to a station adjacent to it and access to that.
Would you like me to start by answering the Dravis Bridge question, Jennifer?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, if we were to have the opportunity as a part of this project to rebuild the Dravis Bridge, we've made a number of assumptions that I think if it was to be rebuilt akin to what we're really desiring to do, we would have the opportunity to make sure that it is providing a safe and comfortable facility for pedestrians and bicycles, that it is really thinking about freight needs, so it can really be optimized essentially to really provide good, strong freight mobility. Just from a connectivity standpoint, it just has a lot of opportunities. So whenever you're talking about a bright, shiny new facility, and you've got the opportunity to really think about what you need, that's probably what's driving that score up so high. What I will say in full candor is that that's probably going to be a very expensive project. And it's probably going to be very complex and take some time to construct. So I just wanted to be candid with you that it doesn't get 100% scores everywhere, but to the extent that it could be built very responsive to the BIRT project's mobility needs, that's why it would score quite well.
And I think the roundabout as well was another piece of what I heard as Dan's question. Do you want to talk a little bit about that one too, Kendra, and just the ways, obviously we're not designing it yet, but the ways that it would or could interact with an ST station?
Absolutely. And this is the Dravis and 17th roundabout. Is that correct? I keep pulling up technical data while I'm looking, so I'm not always looking straight at you guys. So that's one we would want to work really carefully with the ST station, of course, to make sure that it ties in well there. But again, that's an intersection that is very problematic today. Ideally, we'd want to have space. If we weren't going to move to a roundabout, there are additional turn lanes that would need to be fit, which are very problematic from a storage standpoint and right-of-way perspective. So we feel like a roundabout is actually a really neat opportunity to better accommodate and balance those movements, and to do so in such a way that's really thinking about safety and evaluate and trying to really eliminate that high severity collision risk. So it's just, given the number of users, this is a way to more efficiently kind of fit all those movements. But again, I think to the question about ST, we'd certainly want to make sure where we are needing more space that it does knit in well with that station.
Diane, go ahead.
So most of you are probably aware that Seattle, the city of Seattle, doesn't really do roundabouts. And so this is a little bit of a thinking outside of the box for us. And we sat down with our consultants and SDOT's traffic engineers and Chris Breland and looked at the area of Dravis and the way it's constrained and what we've heard in terms of demand for cyclists, and particularly in consideration of an ST3 station being there, how could cyclists more easily access the station, in addition to having traffic movement be more efficient. So, you know, this is just a proposed notion, and certainly, you know, all of this is a report with recommendations. This is not, you know, something that will promise to get built anywhere, but I think that a more detailed conversation with you and Emily would be great to talk about what this could possibly look like and how we could move it forward together.
Thanks, Diane. Okay, I'm going to move us on to corridor management strategies, and then we can certainly come back to any additional project-related questions. So, Tony, can I invite you to jump in and introduce the corridor management approach?
Yeah. This is Tony Woody with. Just a little bit of background on the corridor management approach. So we're really building off of, so you just heard Kendra talk a lot about the different projects that they're looking at. What we're doing with these is we're doing just a deeper dive into some specific corridors, some key corridors in the study area. And we've basically been looking at, you can see on the map here on the right, we're looking at basically 6 different corridors. 15th Avenue, Leary Avenue, Emerson Street, Nickerson Street, which is the green corridor you see there, Dravis, Armory Way, and then Magnolia Bridge. So, and we've been really looking at it more from an operational, you know, traffic standpoint, trying to get traffic flowing in the major movements. So we've really started with the projects that Kendra was just discussing about, and then we kind of went through those and looked for ones that were good candidates to build upon. And you can see the dots that are associated on this map also. Those are representing the intersections that we've been looking at also. So can you go to the next, there you go. So each of these corridors has a slightly different characteristic. Obviously 15th Avenue is a major corridor, major freight corridor, a lot of through trips connecting downtown and communities to the north. So that one is a key corridor where we really carries a lot of traffic and currently experiences congestion. Some of the other ones have different local connections to the industrial, you know, industrial areas, and they really have different needs, different contextual needs on them. So some of them, you know, the issues are like 15th around the traffic congestion. Other ones are more about, you know, access locations, geometric constraints, you know, different things like that. So we really looked at each corridor specifically, you know, based on their specific needs that that we've identified for each one of them. So go ahead and go to the next slide. As we were going through this and building upon the projects that were, you know, that were previously developed, we really looked at 6 different categories: signal operations, ITS strategies, traffic control, channelization, striping, access management, and then different capital improvements. So we're really looking to build upon, you know, what was already done, and if there's new opportunities for us to add new projects or, you know, optimize the facilities to increase the traffic flow or to improve the traffic flow. So, and I'll get into I'll just talk a little bit about the operational performance benefits. There's a lot of details here that we could provide. We could get into that at a later time if people have questions. But each one of these corridors, when we implement these list of corridor management strategies, and there are, roughly we found anywhere from, 10 to a dozen, maybe 6 to a dozen additional strategies that could be implemented at each of these corridors that could improve traffic flow. And it really varies depending on which corridor you're looking at. 15th, where we're potentially adding, some of the strategies include using, implementing freight and transit lanes. You see really large operational benefits, up to a 50%, 60% reduction in travel times in some cases. Whereas some of the other ones where you're looking more at the geometric constraints and maybe they're more safety related, you may not see as much of a benefit on those. You may see a 10 to 15% benefit. So without, each one of these, depending on which ones were implemented, you could see pretty significant savings, depending on which corridor you're looking at. And once again, I didn't really get into, we don't have a slide that has all the details, but we do have that information if anybody's interested.
Great, thank you, Tony. And interagency team members, the draft memo that the Concord team developed is something that we've provided to you for further review. That is certainly something that we will make public as we continue to review it and understand what we're seeing in it. Any quick questions for Tony or for Steve from Concord regarding the corridor management strategies? Travis, I don't want to pick on you, but I know this was something that was of interest to you. So if you've got any immediate questions, we can try and answer them now.
Sorry,
okay.
just thinking out loud here. Sorry, took me a minute to find my mute button on my phone.
No problem.
Here. So in terms of maybe I'm just a little dense here, but in terms of the operations performance benefits and some of the stuff you walk through, how is that linked to the list of projects that have been discussed in previous slides? Are those all being taken into account? I know we have a series of corridors we're looking at, but I guess the overall assumptions that's looped in with those.
Yeah.
How is that being looped into this discussion?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
yeah,
those are all the starting point for these corridor management strategies. We basically used those and took a look at them and just did a little bit more detailed look at them. For on the movement level, on the approach level, and then where we found additional opportunities, we added them in. So this is an add-on extension of the projects, looking at a more detailed approach around these corridors.
Got it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, so given that we are rapidly running out of time, of course, because there was so much to cover, I do want to move on, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second and invite Tom to take over. Interagency team members, as we mentioned in our early communications with you and in the agenda, one of the things that we are hoping to hear from you today is any thoughts you might have about some of the projects that are really emerging for you and for your agencies or departments as key priorities. And this is part of, you may remember, one of our scoring criteria is related to interagency support and just what else is happening in terms of this project area. And so this is kind of a way to start sussing some of that out. Certainly not the only piece of it, but that is really what we're looking for here. And we'll try and give everybody a quick opportunity. So Tom, I think you're going to use the interactive map that we had up for the public to walk folks through this.
I will, and let me know if that shows up.
Yes.
Folks are seeing it?
I am.
Great.
So
again, this is the interactive project map that the team put together. That was part of our survey and was a great tool for us to get some fantastic feedback from the community and the many people who weighed in on the online survey. But as Jennifer said, we will really want to focus on the IAT members now to give us some feedback on given all the presentations you've had, the updates today, and the information I know you've been diligent about looking through, we'd love to hear, if there's a project or two or even three that really rise to the top for your agency as being critical to your mission and long-term transportation in the study area. So who wants to jump in?
And I will pick on you, folks. We're not going to make Jerry go first this time. So let's start with.
It's Emily. I can.
Go ahead, Emily.
Sorry, it might be a little disappointing. No, we don't have any specific projects that are jumping to the top of the list for us. As you know, we're super focused on the environmental process for the West Seattle and Ballard Light Rail extension. We have various alternatives that we're studying the benefits and effects of, and so. We don't have any specific priorities to share, but just to say we have been collaborating very closely with the city and the other partners on this call for our project, and we'll continue to do so. So as these projects are further developed, we'll just look forward to collaborating and seeing if there are potentials for conflicts, that we just make sure that everybody can coexist. And that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Emily. And for everyone on the call, Sound Transit has been a great partner here and provided lots of feedback along the way, so we appreciate it. Chris, how about from the Metro standpoint, do you want to weigh in?
Sure, I would echo Emily's points. We've been very focused on and working very closely with Sound Transit on station design and access to the proposed stations in both Ballard and Interbay. And so that's been most of our focus. A couple of things that did pop to mind, I think it's critical that any of these projects are really designed to accommodate buses and freight. Buses in particular, because they don't often have a cab, have different turn radiuses, and I know that auto turn and those things exist to model buses, but often they don't account for things like bus mirrors and other things. Making sure that if they are a transit route, it's critical that they be designed to accommodate buses. We've had some roundabouts and other intersection treatments that actually didn't work and had to be repaired in different cities. And also, we're intrigued by the option of fat lanes. One concern I would have would be in the AM peak. It'd be interesting to know where the freight is coming from at that time of the day. Is it heading northbound when commuters are heading southbound? Something like that. So understanding how the directionality. I know that mornings are a very busy time for freight and a very busy time for transit, but not so much heading north. So I'm interested in that. And then finally, I am very interested personally, and this isn't a Metro thing, in the bike connectivity over coming out of Ballard. Ballard is like a big, gigantic cornhole board, in that it has a very gradual slope. And I lived in Crown Hill, which is pretty far north for years, and was easy to bike in and relatively easy to bike out because it's a big gradual slope. So I think the bike connections coming out of Ballard are critical, and it should, bikes have to be prioritized coming across that bridge.
Great, thanks, Chris. Those are all great points of input. And I don't think I've ever heard Ballard referred to as a cornhole board, so that's a.
Well, I was trying to think of something, and that's the best I could come up with on short notice.
To answer one of your, I think, important questions about the overlap of freight demand and transit demand, particularly during the AM, which we know to be a high point of demand for both trucks and transit. We do have some really good recent data that's being collected by SDOT in conjunction with the UW Freight Lab. So that's something we can certainly follow up with some more information on.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. Let's see, Jerry, we didn't make you go first, but we would love to hear from you.
Thanks. From the Port of Seattle, we are very interested in freight, as you know, and from my seat on the freight board, we appreciate the project coming to the freight board this week and going over some of the items. So we are looking at things through that lens. My summary here is looking at it through that lens. But in addition, the cruise season, not in 2020, but we anticipate in future years, there's a major user in this area seasonally. So we're thinking about these projects with the cruise industry in mind, and also our potential uplands development. And the other filter that we're thinking about this is the state dynamic, the fact that this was funded by the state, and a list of projects will be going forward to the state, and recognize there's a range of projects, and we want to make sure that we highlight items that are of a state interest that hopefully this study will get their attention and will get some interest in funding. So that's a different lens through which we try and prioritize projects. So as I said, I'm looking forward to sitting down and walking through some of the projects, but for now, I would say we're all a Twitter about understanding more about the fat lanes. The Dravis Bridge, I think, was an important addition, and I know also coming out of the Freight Master Plan was the Dravis interchange, making some changes there actually at 15th. And it's not clear to me how those are separated in the report. The 11th Avenue in Ballard was an intriguing new project we hadn't paid attention to before. And the concept for the Ballard Bridge of an interim use, potentially including a reversible lane, was very interesting and kind of scary sounding at first. And then our team did a little bit of looking around the country at where reversible lanes are used, and you know, we got a little bit more comfortable. So I think having examples of things like that helps ease the surprise. But I would say our first filter are the projects I just mentioned.
Great, thanks, Jerry. Some real important points in terms of the context and the purpose of this study. And I think our team will look forward to hearing more about what your team found out in their research as well. So we'll definitely follow up and look forward to sitting down with port staff here shortly. Travis, how about you?
Yeah, I think we're sort of echoing King County Metro and Sound Transit, not necessarily a priority approach, but I think our overall priorities for the corridor, clearly freight and transit access are key, but also making sure that the bike ped connections, we're avoiding specific conflicts along this very busy corridor, and also making it easy for folks to access the transit so they can access points of the downtown core or elsewhere. Just making sure we can, as these parts of the system come together, we're looking at how this corridor functions holistically.
Thanks. Hey, Tom, one of the things that just occurred to me is that we might not have explained for our public audience who's with us what the heck a fat lane is and how it actually functions. Can you say a couple words about that?
Absolutely. The idea with the freight access transit lane would be very similar to what you see in many places in Seattle, including on 15th today, where we have transit lanes that we call business access transit lanes, which allow bus-only operations along the curbside while also permitting private vehicles that are making right turns at intersections or accessing businesses. The idea with the freight access transit lane would be to have a similar configuration that allowed both buses and certain classes of trucks to operate in those lanes. What's not fully defined at this point is sort of the temporal aspect of that, and certainly more study would be needed to determine whether there's capacity within those lanes to handle both buses and the amount of trucks moving, particularly during peak times. But it certainly, there certainly are opportunities at various times of day for sharing of those lanes, particularly when transit volumes are lower.
Great, thanks, Tom. Let's see, we heard from Metro, Sound Transit, the Port, and WashDOT. Any other interagency team thoughts or comments about some of the projects that have jumped out to you as potentially critical? All right, well, Tom, do you want to talk us through the next steps then for project development? Or not really development, really, we're past development. We are ready for refinement and preparing recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. So the team's working hard over the coming weeks to take all the input and continue conversations with the partner agencies, all the feedback that we've gotten, as well as the technical analysis to come up with a recommended system plan. Part of that plan will be, as Diane mentioned, a timeline and funding strategy for replacement of both the major bridges, but also a multimodal network plan that'll address the key network needs for each of the bridges. Each of the modes. There will be elements of those modal plans that are tied to one of the major bridge investments, but a lot of the key projects that we've identified can move forward either way. So we'll really be identifying what some of the most critical investments are and stressing those in the plan, as well as identifying some smaller, simpler projects that it may be possible to move forward in the shorter term, given the significant funding constraints that we know are in place today. So we'll be working on that over the next few weeks. As Diane mentioned, the final report is due to the legislature in November. So we expect to have an initial draft of our recommendations in the month of September.
Great, thank you, Tom. All right, so we did pause as we went through that for any interagency team comments or questions, just as we wrap up this piece, and I want to make sure we've got time for public comment. Any additional interagency team thoughts or questions on the project piece? Okay, well, let's make some time for public comment, and then we will come back to any final interagency team thoughts. And I know that many of you will have meetings that you need to head to at 1:30, so we'll do our best to move quickly here. So for our public comment period today, again, this is a little bit more formal than our public meetings in terms of we are going to try and follow the list of folks who signed up, and please indicate any interest that you have to make a comment in the chat window, or feel free to raise your hand in Zoom. Again, you can use the participants tab to do that. And then what I'm going to do is work us through the online form. I will be checking in to see who's making a note that they'd like to comment in chat and who's got their hand raised. I know we've got a couple of folks on the phone, and so I'll try and check in with you as well. So we will unmute you when it is your turn to speak, and please try and keep your comments to about 2 minutes per person. We will address those that are questions to the extent that we can, and then can follow up on any other questions after we go. So first on my list, I do have a couple of folks that I don't actually see in the meeting, but just in case you're on the phone, I want to check. I have Brian Sundberg and Mike Eddy signed up. Are either of you on the line? Okay, I don't see either of them, pardon me, so we will come back to them. Next on my list, I have Ben, and last time I butchered your name and you told me how to say it properly, and now I've forgotten. Bracemley? Did I get even close?
That's it, very good.
Oh, yay! Please go ahead.
I wear two hats. One is the coordinator of the Northwest Seattle Coalition that organizes for better outcomes in Sound Transit 3, and two is as a transit chair for the Magnolia Community Council. And for both, we're very concerned that there is enough capacity to allow more transit service to come to the Interbay station from Magnolia in the future. We know that there's a significant need for multimodal access, bikes, peds, freight, transit to that area, and that will increase, especially as we're rebuilding the one-for-one replacement of the Magnolia Bridge. And the Magnolia Bridge is just as important from that perspective, we believe, because we need that car capacity to be brought away from a congested Dravis Street Bridge. So that's our thought process around it generally, and shared by most, I believe. And so I guess in those terms, we're interested in the next steps and funding and how the planning, design, engineering process will be funded and when, and if you have any plans to incorporate that into this report, and to exactly how and who will update or replace the Dravis Street Bridge as well as the Magnolia Bridge. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Ben. And certainly in terms of how the recommended projects move forward, what the timelines might look like, and what potential funding sources might be, that is indeed part of the final report for this project. So we'll do our best to address as much of that as we can as we move forward. Thanks for your comment. Next on my list, I have Carla Cotilla. Is that right, Carla? Let me bring you off mute here. Sorry about that.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Carla Cotilla. I was a long-term former resident of Queen Anne and Magnolia. Currently, I'm a dog walking volunteer for the Seattle Animal Shelter. And that cute little section of Armory Way west of 15th, it's a non-arterial. SDOT keeps telling me that as I ask them to put a crosswalk on it somewhere. And there's a lot of traffic in all these projects talking about what's going to be happening there. Potential fat lanes, potential Magnolia Bridge replacement. So please consider the amount of foot traffic in that area between the box stores, Armory and rental parking there, animal shelter volunteers, all of that. We've had couple near misses of people almost hit. So it's kind of a crazy environment. Just visualize Thanksgiving, November 2019. It was insane. Anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you, Carla, and thanks for being here today. Next on my list, I have Ray Dubicki. And Ray, you just jumped on my screen. Sorry, there we go. I found you again. There you go.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thanks for being here.
Thank you for the meeting and thank you for all the information. My concern is that the analysis of freight is incomplete and it's going to lead to an overconstruction of roads. First, there's nothing about rail in the study. Second, who is producing truck traffic and where does it go once it leaves the area? The multimodal analysis has times, but they're only to very local corners, but no counts of trucks and no looks at how those trucks get out of the area once they're past Market Street or Leary or those other roads. Right now, all of the designs that we're talking about in these proposals are for these oversized collectors that are dependent on this nebulous concept of freight, but we don't have the numbers. Nothing in the produced document so far answers the question of what these businesses in the area actually need, or whether there's a better way of getting people in and out of Interbay other than oversized urban highways. I ask that a better report be produced in order to show what these actual numbers are so that we can really consider whether 4 lanes of Leary or 4 lanes of Westlake or getting down to the Alaska Way is the best way to get in and out of Interbay. And that will change what we do on all of these bridges throughout the area.
Okay, thank you for that, Ray. I'm going to see if Tom or Kendra or Tony wants to chime in here. I know we do have additional freight information that we've been working with the UW's Freight Lab to collect and use as part of our analysis. And I believe when we have the full report of findings, that will be included. But Tom, do you want to chime in here?
I will just say that we do have quite good data on point-specific truck volumes, and that SDOT, in partnership with the UW, has set up a data collection system that's giving us good and fine-grained data, not only on truck volumes by location, but also the type of vehicle, which does give us some indication of type of freight or goods movement, and sort of likeliness of whether those are long distance haulers or more localized freight and goods movement. So I do think we have good data. This is an area that the city expects to continue to be in use as industrial and maritime uses, which require goods movement, and many of those businesses do need truck access. So appreciate your comments, and we'll definitely share that information as we put the final report out.
And Tony, I saw your camera come back on. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, just that's good, Tom. Yeah, Tom covered it. We have some 24-hour counts, so we're able to get a profile throughout the day also, not just the peak period. So we have pretty good data on that.
Sounds good. And Ray, thanks. I see your question about whether it's possible to see the actual numbers before the final report, and we'll work with SDOT to determine what is ready to be made available. It's honestly not very long until the final report, so it may happen all pretty close to the same time, but we'll follow up on that piece. Next on my list, I have William Ameling, and apologies if I said that improperly. William, are you here? I'm looking for you so I can unmute you. Here we go. All right,
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes, you did, and you did pronounce it correctly.
Oh, good.
I was curious if any work is being done on the intersection of 15th and Market. Afternoon northbound traffic, that is definitely a choke point that backs up all the way past south of the Ballard Bridge. So any discussions about improving capability or capacity northbound at the Ballard Bridge would end up being bottlenecked at that intersection.
Okay, great. Thank you for that comment. Is there anybody on the project team that wants to respond to that? We'll note it for our analysis moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, William. Let's see, Eugene Wasserman, I'm noting a couple of comments from you regarding the North Seattle Industrial Association. Questions both about better involving the maritime and industrial sector in the project, and then also wanting to be involved in any discussion about whether a roundabout would work. And Eugene, is there anything, so first off, thank you for those comments. We would love to work directly with NSIA and try and reach a few more folks in the maritime and industrial sector. So would certainly welcome your partnership for that. If there's anything that you want to add to your comment, we can certainly invite you to do that as well. So let me give you the opportunity to chime in for a second.
No, we would, first of all, we'd like to work on the roundabout because we think that would be a trouble for our trucks. We'd rather have that discussion before it gets on a permanent list. But we're also concerned about the lack of involvement from people who run freight in the area in the surveys that were done. To us, it seems like online surveys don't work for the business community, yet SDOT keeps exclusively using them. We're involved in several other projects where that's a concern as well. Anyone could just sign up, and essentially these projects become bike and ped projects and not freight and transit projects. So those are our concerns, and I'll probably send a list over to the staff for people they might want to talk to before the project is complete.
Excellent. We will look for that. Thank you. Appreciate that. And the sooner the better.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, let me just take a quick look through my list here. Let me check again because Brian Sundberg and Mike Eddy did sign up. Brian or Mike, are either of you on the phone? Okay. It looks like, William, I see your hand up again. Let me just do a quick check of my list and make sure that those who signed up have been addressed. And I think so, and we can come back to a couple of the other comments that were made as well. But William, did you have another comment? Let me get you unmuted. There you
Yes,
go.
thank you again. My other comment was whether or not a past study at additional multimodal crossings of the ship canal between the Fremont Bridge and the Ballard Bridge would be included in this activity. There was a study done on a crossing at 3rd Avenue West/Northwest that would seem to have a lot of benefits in decongesting all of the traffic using the Ballard Bridge and the Fremont Bridge.
Tom, do you want to take that one in terms of the specific alternatives that we did include here?
Yeah, we did not look at that. And I believe what you're referring to is sort of one of the early transit studies that was done, looking at connections between downtown and areas north of the ship canal. I think amongst the study team, we certainly recognize that the lack of permeability across the ship canal is a major constraint in travel in Seattle and in this area. We are also, focused in the study on opportunity to replace or rehabilitate three major really bridge structures in a situation where the city has little money available for bridge enhancements or replacements. So have not been really focused on adding another very expensive bridge to the project list at this point in time, but appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Tom. And Diane, I know you were wanting to add something to Ben's comment from earlier. Do you want to chime in now? And then we'll go to Brandon and Janice after that.
I do. So Ben Gracemly, is that correct? Had asked the question about Dravis and how or who would replace it. And so I just want to be clear that what we're doing is we're creating a report for the Washington State Legislature that will have a number of projects, recommended projects that would help improve the movement of people and goods in Ballard and Interbay. And none of the projects that we are posing necessarily have been funded, and nor have partnerships been built, nor have funding strategies been identified. So when this report goes to the Washington State Legislature, the notion is that should there be another transportation funding package, possibly some of these projects, well, it would be the larger projects and the projects that move the largest numbers of people and goods might be considered in state funding packages. So that's where we're at, and I can't say who would build them. I also have to say that the Dravis Bridge over the BNSF tracks is owned, like the bottom part is owned by BNSF. The top part of the structure is owned by SDOT. So that's a complicated partnership right there, and we would need to be working together to make any kind of changes to that bridge.
Thanks, Diane. Next up, we've got Brandon Cox. And
hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right, thanks. Hey, I just want to start off by saying thanks for what you guys are doing. I appreciate it. I think it's a big deal to look at the future, so nice work. I'll admit I missed most of your presentation. I'm kind of dual working at the same time. I'm trying to tune in. But I wonder if there's anything going on to more immediately address any safety concerns for the Ballard Bridge. So I'll use myself as a personal example. I bicycle, walk, run, drive, basically everything you could do other than driving a giant truck across that bridge. And I don't see that as like a very safe transport corridor, and there's constantly complaints and friction between users. So if there's anything that could be done in the short term to address the safety concerns on that bridge, I'd really appreciate it. I think others would as well.
Great, thank you, Brandon. And there is a project included that is for some near-term improvements to the Ballard Bridge to address some of those concerns that we've heard over the years, even before a larger structure is built or a replacement is completed. So that is in the project list. Okay, I think we've got time for one more comment. And Janice, I'm blanking on your last name, Traven or Travin?
It's Traven.
Traven, okay, yes. Welcome.
Like Raven with a T in front.
That, I will remember that, thank you.
So I have three comments with the Dravis. I think everybody agrees that improvements on Dravis would be fantastic. I just wanted to verify that it wouldn't be instead of an in-kind replacement. It would I just wanted to verify that you're looking at that in addition to the other improvements. That's the first thing. I also would like to find out whether the initial pairing that you've had of the in-kind replacement with the mid-level Ballard Bridge and the low-level Ballard Bridge and the Armory, if those pairings are still what's guiding the process, or because it's looking like, for example, the mid-level Ballard Bridge just costs a lot more without any benefits. If that would be, if the lower level could then be paired with an option that the Magnolia community actually wants. That was my second comment. The third comment for all of the IAT is, I know that your project just covers as far west as 28th Avenue West, but west, even getting up to 28th Avenue West, there are a lot of streets that are discontinuous. There are a lot of steep hills, and there's a lot of Magnolia that's west of 28th West. So the notion that we're only looking at property values, the few houses in the southern part of Magnolia. I live fairly far north in Magnolia, and I use the Magnolia Bridge because it's the fastest way to get off of the hill for me. So Magnolia is not monolithic. It has a lot of topography, and I wish that more people could understand that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Janice. And I think just to quickly tackle those couple of questions, indeed, we're looking at Dravis not as a replacement for the other bridge alternatives that have been discussed, but as an additional project. And then the potential mixing and matching of the scenarios. Tom and Kendra, I'm going to look to you to this, but I believe the answer is there is still an opportunity to do a little bit of mix and matching as we go forward. Is that fair?
We have, of course, in any study, we have a limited amount of budget for performing modeling analysis. And so we did have to mix and match. But what I would say to this question is that we are looking at the individual merits of the projects as well. And we have an ability to kind of piece that out. And with respect to topography, we fully appreciate that issue about Magnolia. If I may, I just wanted to just answer one question that also occurred in the chat, just asking if we paid attention to the state study for the Armory parcel, and the answer is yes.
Great, thank you. All right, well, thanks everybody so much for the comments today. For those of you who have additional comments or questions that occur to you, you can still share those through the link that is on the SDOT page. And so again, that is www.tinyurl.com/Ballard Interbay. We welcome your comments or questions at any time. So just to quickly wrap us up today, Diane, would you like to talk about our immediate next steps?
Yep, because like I said at the beginning of this presentation, we are in the running portion of the project. So we are going to close out August by creating a project package recommendations. We're going to move into September and develop our draft plan and bridge replacement bridge replacement timeline and funding strategy. And again, those will be for the Ballard and Magnolia bridges, will not be for Dravis. In October, we're going to refine our draft plan, be looking at all our public input, and hold a meeting that we will invite you all to, because now we have your email addresses, and take additional agency comments, and then we're going to submit that final report. So we are just moving along. And so you are currently at IAT meeting number 4. IAT meeting number 5 will be happening in September. We don't quite have a date, but as soon as we do, we'll put it on our website and we'll let you know. And then there's possibly a meeting 6, but we haven't determined if that will be necessary. So this is the final slide, Jennifer. So with this, I want to thank you. Thanks to the interagency team for being with us. And thanks to all of the public for your comments and your interest in this project. You are making our recommendations better, and we will take all of the comments that have been put in the chat and add them to all of our public comments. So thank you all, and thanks to all of the SDOT team, the consultant team as well.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Interagency team members, thanks again for being here, for all of your comments in advance and feedback. We will be following up directly with you for some of the more focused discussions. And then again, thanks to our members of the public for joining us. It's great to have you here, and your interest in the project is very much appreciated. So with that, everyone have a great afternoon. Enjoy the upcoming Labor Day holiday. I know it's still a couple weeks away, but we won't see you until after that. And we'll look forward to connecting with everyone in September. Take care. Have a good afternoon. Bye all.
Thank you.